Snow came down slanted and mean on Christmas Eve, the kind that buried hoofprints and memories alike. Eli Carter reined his horse at the edge of Dry Creek and watched the town turn its back to the night. Lamps went dark one by one, doors barred, hearts already shut. Folk said storms carried trouble, and trouble carried her name, the woman everyone crossed the street to avoid. Eli felt the cold bite his beard and thought of his little boy waiting at home. He had no room for trouble either. Yet the wind carried a sound that did not belong to the storm, a knock, thin as a prayer, and it pulled him from the saddle of habit and fear. They called her Mara Hale, though most just called her Curse. She stood at the edge of the boardwalk wrapped in a threadbare shawl, eyes too steady for a beggar, hands raw from work no one would admit she did. Every rancher said she brought sickness to cattle. Every shopkeeper said coins vanished when she passed. Every preacher said her past was a stain no snow could cover. Eli had heard it all. He had nodded along before, because nodding cost less than standing alone. Yet seeing her there with snow crusting her lashes, he felt something twist, a sense that the town was wrong, or maybe that right and wrong were not as simple as folk like to say. Eli was a widower with a son named Jacob, a boy who believed Christmas Eve was when miracles rode the wind like sparks from a fire. Eli believed in chores and fences and keeping pain locked away. Belief was a dangerous thing. It had taken his wife in childbirth and left him with a silence he could not mend. Still he taught Jacob to say grace, to share bread, to open a door when the night asked. Tonight the night was asking hard. The storm rose, the church bell froze mid-ring, and Mara swayed on her feet as if the wind meant to take her, for good men watched from behind frosted windows. Women pulled children back from the glass. No one stepped out. Eli felt their eyes weigh on him when he swung down. His boots hit the boards with a sound like judgment. Mara looked up, ready for another refusal. He could see it in the set of her jaw, the practiced way she braced for cruelty. He cleared his throat and found his voice rough. "Ma'am, you best get out of this wind." The words surprised him. They surprised her more. A murmur rippled, but no one else moved. He walked her past the saloon where laughter died, past the mercantile where shutters slammed, toward the trail that led to his ranch. Each step felt like crossing a line drawn by the town. The snow thickened, the stars vanished. Mara spoke at last. "You do not owe me anything." Her voice was steady but tired. Eli shook his head and almost smiled. Owing had nothing to do with it. He thought of Jacob waiting with a wooden toy he had carved, of the empty chair by the hearth, of the kind of man he wanted his son to see. When the world pressed hard, the ranch house crouched low against the wind, smoke curling like a promise. Jacob burst through the door before Eli could knock. "Pa, who is she?" His eyes were bright and unafraid. Eli knelt and set his hands on the boy's shoulders. "This is Mara. She is cold and hungry, and it is Christmas Eve." Jacob did not hesitate. He grabbed her hand and pulled her inside. The room filled with heat and the smell of stew. Mara stood stiff as a fence post, waiting for the catch that never came. They ate in a hush broken by the fire in the storm. Mara sipped broth like it might vanish. Eli watched her hands, scarred and careful. He told Jacob a story of a star that guided lost travelers, not from any book, just something he made up. Mara listened, tears shone but did not fall. Outside the wind howled. Inside something settled, a sense that the night had shifted, that a door once opened could not be closed again. When Jacob fell asleep by the hearth, Mara spoke low. "The town will not forgive you for this." Eli poked the fire and shrugged. Forgiveness was a coin he had learned not to chase. Believing in someone cost less than living afraid. He offered her the spare room and a place by the fire. The clock ticked toward midnight. Christmas Eve held its breath, and in a small ranch house on the edge of Dry Creek, a single father chose faith over fear, setting a spark that would test the town before dawn. Morning broke, pale and sharp. Christmas Day wearing a hard face, Eli rose before the sun, the ranch quiet except for the fire settling and the wind easing its grip. He stepped outside to split wood and found tracks already crossing his yard. Boot prints, several pressed, deep and fresh. He knew those boots, town boots. Curiosity always came before kindness in Dry Creek. By the time he hauled the wood inside, whispers were already riding the cold air like coyotes scenting blood. Mara stood by the window, watching the horizon. She had slept little. She knew the shape of trouble, and it knew her. Jacob woke laughing, unaware, dragging his blankets to the table and asking if Christmas had found them. Eli smiled and said, "Sometimes it came quiet." They ate in simple peace. Biscuits and honey, coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Jacob unwrapped his carved horse and whooped. Mara watched with a look that cut deeper than joy. Eli caught it and understood. Some losses never wrapped themselves back up. When the boy ran outside to test his new treasure in the snow, Mara spoke. "I will leave after breakfast," she said it steady. "I will not bring harm to your door." Eli leaned back and felt the chair creak. Harm had a way of finding doors, whether invited or not. He said, "You will stay until the storm clears. That is all." He did not argue, did not plead. He believed that dignity was a kind of shelter too. By mid-morning the town came calling without knocking. First Mrs. Granger with her tight mouth and folded arms, then two ranch hands pretending they had lost a calf, then the preacher himself, hat in hand, eyes measuring. They stood in the yard as if crossing it might stain their boots. Eli stepped out to meet them, cold and calm. Mrs. Granger spoke of rumors. The preacher spoke of concern. Neither spoke of mercy. Mara stayed inside. She knew this ritual well. The way men spoke around her instead of to her. Eli listened, nodded once, and said she was his guest, and Christmas was not a day for casting stones. Silence followed, heavy as snow on a weak roof. The preacher sighed and said the town had reason. That sickness followed her. That misfortune bloomed where she walked. Eli thought of his wife dying in clean sheets with a doctor present, of cattle struck by lightning on clear days, of children taken by fevers no one could name. Reason was a poor lantern in a storm. He said misfortune did not need a woman to invite it, and fear made liars of good men. A ranch hand spat and turned away. Mrs. Granger sniffed and crossed herself. The preacher left with a warning that sounded too much like a threat. That afternoon Mara told her story by the fire. Not all of it, but enough. She spoke of a husband lost to drink and fists, of running with nothing but a shawl and a scar, of working kitchens and stables until whispers chased her out. Every town had a reason, none had proof. She had learned to keep moving, to take blame like weather. Jacob listened from the floor, serious as a judge. When she finished he said, "You can stay here. We have room." Mara laughed, a sound rusty from disuse. Eli felt something loosen in his chest. The boy saw straight, unburdened by history. Trouble does not like being ignored. It came riding at dusk, a scream from the south pasture, sharp and real. Eli grabbed his rifle and ran. Jacob shouted from the porch. Mara followed despite his look. They found a steer down, leg caught in a drifted fence, breathing hard, blood in the snow. Eli worked the wire free while Mara held the animal's head and spoke low. Steady, the steer calmed, strength returned. Eli noticed the way she knew where to place her hands, how fear eased at her touch. The animal rose and limped away, alive, breathing, the snow unbloodied by miracle or chance. Eli did not know which the scream had carried. Lanterns bobbed on the road as men arrived expecting proof of wickedness. They found a saved steer instead. Confusion spread, anger stalled. Mrs. Granger whispered. The preacher frowned. Eli met their eyes, said nothing. Mara stood tall, shawl off her shoulders, scars plain, unashamed. The wind died down as if listening. One ranch hand muttered thanks under his breath. Another tipped his hat. Small things, but snow melts one flake at a time. That night the ranch glowed against the dark, candles lit, stew warming. Jacob asleep with his horse tucked close. Eli and Mara sat quiet, the clock marking time toward another midnight. She said the town would not change easy. He said neither did fences, but mending them kept cattle home. Christmas Day closed its fist around them, not with joy loud and bright, but with something steadier, a promise that belief planted in hard ground could still take root. Even here, even now, the day after Christmas dawned clean and cruel, the kind of cold that made every breath count. Eli woke with a sense that the quiet was borrowed. Trouble never stayed gone in Dry Creek. It only circled, waiting. He saddled his horse while Jacob fed the chickens. Mara stood in the doorway watching the sky. She had learned to read mornings the way others read scripture. This one carried judgment. Before noon, a rider came hard from town, hat pulled low, horse lathered, shouting that sickness had struck the Granger place. A child down with fever, breath rattling like loose boards. The words hit the yard and stayed there. Mrs. Granger herself rode in soon after, pride broken clean in half. She slid from the saddle and nearly fell. Begging came hard to her tongue, but fear made room for it. She said the doctor was snowed in. The preacher was praying. Nothing was working. Eyes turned to Mara like a compass needle, snapping north. Old beliefs die slow, but desperation is faster. Eli looked at Mara, did not speak for her, never would. She stepped forward on her own, said she knew herbs, knew how to cool a fever and wait it out. No miracles promised, just work. Mrs. Granger nodded like a woman drowning, grabbing any hand. They rode together through drifts and whispers. Townsfolk, watching from doorways, the same eyes that had shut her out now clung to her back. Inside the Granger house the air was thick with heat and fear. The child burned, skin flushed, breath shallow. Mara set to work with calm born of long nights. Eli fetched water. Mrs. Granger held her child and cried into her apron. Hours passed, measured by breath and hope. The fever broke slow, like ice cracking on a river. When it did, the room exhaled as one. No angels sang, no thunder rolled, just a child sleeping easier. A live word traveled faster than snowmelt. By evening the street filled. The same men who had warned and threatened now shuffled and cleared throats. The preacher spoke of gratitude and lessons. Mrs. Granger stepped forward and said what few ever did. She said she had been wrong. The word landed heavy, honest. Dry Creek did not cheer. It stood quiet. But quiet can be a beginning. Mara did not gloat. She only asked for a place to work. Honest pay. No more running. Eli felt pride rise and checked it. This was her moment. Not his spring did not come all at once. Neither did forgiveness. Some doors opened, others stayed shut. Mara took work mending, cooking, tending the sick. People learned her name without spitting it after. Jacob walked beside her through town, fearless as ever, and that taught adults more than sermons. Eli fixed fences and watched the way the ranch filled with laughter again. Not loud, not reckless, but present. The empty chair by the hearth did not vanish. It never would. Yet it no longer ruled the room. The man who had started the worst of it came one night drunk and mean. Words sharp as broken glass, accusing, blaming, wanting the old order back. Eli met him on the porch, fists clenched. Mara stepped between them, voice steady, saying she would not carry his fear anymore. The man faltered, left shame trailing him like a shadow. Dry Creek watched and learned that courage did not always wear spurs. By next Christmas Eve, snow fell gentle. Lamps stayed lit. A knock came at the ranch door, and it was neighbors with bread and stories, not judgment. Jacob hung a star in the window, crooked and bright. Mara stood beside Eli. Belonging earned not by miracle but by showing up when it counted. Eli thought of that first night. The wind, the choice. Believing had not erased pain, but it had made room for grace. Years later, folks would say Dry Creek changed that winter. They would argue why. Some would credit faith, others luck. Eli knew better. It changed because one door opened when it mattered, because a woman everyone rejected was invited in, and because a single father chose to teach his son that Christmas Eve was not about who deserved warmth, but about who needed it. The snow kept falling. The world stayed hard. But inside that small ranch house belief held fast, and that was enough.